I am absolutely delighted to say that we are joined today by the writer and the director of this film. So please welcome to the stage Stewart Lee and Michael Cumming. Welcome, welcome.
Hi.
Stewart, Michael.
Hey.
I mean, it's an unconventional film, but that seems to fit an unconventional subject. Was that always the intention?
Well, there wasn't really any other way of doing it, was there? Because we didn't get no one paid to do it, and so it was sort of done on the hoof. And also, as you can see, Robert often didn't really remember things that had happened to him. So we had to kind of be able to chop and change and improvise as information came to light. And then I suppose it sort of became a film about the process of trying to make a film about those sorts of people as well.
What he's saying is we made it up as we went along, basically, which we did. Which is a great way of making a film sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, normally when you do a project, people ask you what it's about, and then they decide and what it is, and then they decide if they want to fund it. And if anyone had asked us that about this, we wouldn't have known, because it was a process of finding out. And actually, if you kind of know what something is, I don't know what the point of doing it is anyway, really. So it did sort of fit with that process, didn't it?
Yeah, and it wasn't the sort of film where you would have researchers and things like that. So we sort of modelled along, the two of us, with a little bit of outside help when we needed it. Yeah.
Well, the research actually was taking Rob for a curry in Birmingham.
Exactly.
And you filming it.
Yeah.
What kind of curry?
I can't remember, just that one place that he particularly likes, yeah.
It would be a meat... probably a meat madras with boiled rice is nice, yeah.
Somebody knows. All right, okay, this is good. An expert audience. All right.
Well, it's likely to be full of his relatives and people that know him, given...
How many people here have actually seen him play? How many people have seen? Yeah, quite a few. Okay.
There's a man in a Nightingale's T-shirt there at the front.
I mean,
That's
right.
brilliant.
That's dedication. I like it. Yeah. So I'm fascinated by this arguing with earlier versions of his own stories. Did the grounds keep shifting even as you were making it, basically? It wasn't just, you were discovering new information, but also he corrected himself.
It was when apropos of nothing, Rob at Six Music started complaining about Steve Beresford, the free jazz improviser, having a squeaky pork chop toy. And I just happened to know Steve Beresford, and then I thought, well, if we can talk to him, and then that became a sort of trope of the film, trying to verify these stories, and that's why when Rob mentioned right at the very end, I mean, what should have been a neat end to the film was that scene with the King Kong statue, but he suddenly remembered that he'd had a shower with Robin Asquith, and so on the train on the way home between us, we managed to find Robin Asquith using the internet, and. To try and verify it, but it sort of spoils the clean line of the end. But it was within the spirit of the film, wasn't it? We had to take that.
Yeah, and it was that thing of letting one thing dictate the next part of the story, which you would never be allowed to do in a normal film or in a TV show or the sort of stuff we normally do. So we did it in this. Yeah.
Can we assume that the sequel to this will be a Robin Asquith film all about his bathing habits over time?
Well.
Funnily enough.
Well, actually, the funny thing is about doing another film is this was done, or crowdfunding. We did shows where I would do work in progress stand-up, and Michael would show his documentary he made about working with Chris Morris, and so because there was a lot of goodwill towards the group, and historically we kind of managed to make it on the hoof. We had an idea for another film, but the problem is. You can't not pay everyone again, and then suddenly you need an actual budget, and then you don't have the same freedom that you have when you've got nothing. So it's kind of a weird limbo now, where I don't quite know how to do the other idea that we had.
Yeah. I think once you get used to the freedom of working out of your shed and making things up, I think it would feel difficult to go.
I mean, that's worth pointing out that Michael spent kind of 9 months in a shed editing it and relearning editing, having got to the stage where he was a TV director, having to go back to learning those sorts of skills, and there were lots of people who helped us cut corners with it.
Yeah, it feels like a labour of love, though. It feels like there's so much affection and so much goodwill to you guys as well as to Robert. It just feels like it's I don't know. I think it comes through, right, in the film. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. Although Robert also, he kind of asked me years ago about making a film about the group, and I think he thought it would help sell the group in some way. Then when we actually started making it, I think he realised he didn't really want to be in it, and well, he didn't really want to be the subject of a film, and so he's quite withdrawn from it and quite unhelpful a lot of the time, which is quite funny that someone had asked you to make a film about them, then when you start doing it, they go, I don't really want to do this. It's too late.
You can kind of understand that. I mean, in the beginning as well, Stu, I think you probably would agree, you weren't sure whether how much you wanted to be in it and how much a part of it you wanted to be, or whether we were just sort of the behind-the-scenes thing. But it felt important. As soon as you saw Stu and Rob together, it felt you had to sort of do stuff with them because they were like a really good sort of double act. And also, I think there's because the stories intertwine so well, and you could have made another documentary about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what was really good about him from a comedy point of view, though, is about 15 years ago, I did about 3 of those comedy panel shows in a row because I needed to try and get some money, and that everyone sort of blocks you, and they try to do better than you. Whereas with Rob, he seemed to have an understanding. You could sort of set him up for something, and then he was really good at working out where to go with it. And much better than lots of comedians, to be honest, who are ego-driven. He seemed to have a view of the whole. Right at the end, when we were talking about the King Kong, I had a feeling as Michael was filming it that this could be the end. If he could just say what I was hoping he'd say. And then not only did he say that thing about, I suppose you could say this statue is like the Nightingales, but he also intuited that if I backed out of the frame and he walked around the statue and looked at it, it'd be a perfect sort of setup. And most comedians wouldn't do that. They'd move towards the centre of the shot so that they were the subject of it. You know what I mean? They wouldn't have the lack of ego or the sense or the sense of a bigger whole to kind of know when to back off and when to join in. He was intuitively brilliant, and also at the Stone Circle he was really funny at that, and he absolutely didn't want to go there. I don't think he likes being outside really, but he was really got the feel for what was funny about that. I kind of had this idea that if we went there and it was an ancient monument and we didn't quite know what it was, there was something that was similar to what he was doing, and he intuited it and was really funny about it.
That's a fascinating aspect of the film, that both, the massive presence, the massive character, and yet not a massive ego in that sense, not an attention grabber, not wanting to talk at length about himself. It's almost a contradiction. It shouldn't be, but it feels almost like a contradiction.
It is, and I think he does struggle with that. And I think there's a bit in the film, where he says, it sort of worked out that if him and his group didn't go out and do that sort of thing, nobody else is doing it. So he felt that was important, and that's how he overcomes his nerves, and that's how he sort of gets past that, that sort of thing. But
I have to ask about some of the stuff that isn't in the film, because I read one interview where you talked about, this blew my mind. He was briefly going to do a video for the theme song to Anastasia, the animated princess movie. If any of you have seen that. That's very incongruous to me, but you couldn't find out anything about it?
He did make it.
He did make it.
Right. Look, don't put this on the internet, okay? He did make it. But I think the video for Anastasia was being used as some kind of money laundering thing for a criminal gang. And it ended up with Rob jumping out of a moving car with a plastic bag full of money. And he was reluctant to talk about that on camera.
I can't imagine why.
Well, I don't really know. Some things we couldn't really get to the bottom of. There's some sort of incident involving him being thrown off a Scottish television folk music show as well. We couldn't really get to the bottom of that. There's a few things that we've really got. And then, of course, the other thing is, at what arbitrary... I mean, we had to stop filming at some point. But then the weird thing is, this has created an extra kind of act to the... I mean, to be honest, the fact that the projector here this morning caught fire and this was nearly cancelled, that should have been the end of this, really. It sort of feels like it keeps creating its own extra stories just around itself. Michael shot some footage of the fire engines coming this morning when the the projector caught fire. And if you were recutting this, like The Wicker Man on its 50th anniversary, the perfect coda would be when it finally gets shown at the Glastonbury Festival, the tent nearly burns down. Sort of like...
That would be amazing, though. By the way, if I will take questions from the audience at some point, so do get your thinking caps on, please. I will try and, save some time, and we have a mic, I think, that's going to be roving around. Do you think they could happen now? Do you think, like, the Nightingales and the prefects before them, like, is there any room now in the world for bands like these to really kind of come up? I guess if there is, they're all here this weekend, but...
A lot of them will be. I think what we've found, hanging around the Nightingales and other bands is how many bands like that there are who don't ever make any money from it, and how many of them are probably on Six Music all the time, but are not making a living from it.
Well, I agree with you, but I also think it's about a particular time now. It's about a post-war window of social mobility that was created by cheap rents, squats, the punk scene, not having to have credit cards, not having to have ID, and the sort of viability of doing that. And I think that there is a certain kind of artist that isn't able to get by now, because you're never going to get paid by Spotify. If you sell 500 singles that you've actually pressed up for £1 each, you make more than you do from 5 million Spotify plays. So I think there's that kind of DIY artist is priced out. They're priced out by changes in society, by changes in housing, by changes in education, by the withdrawal of grants, by the withdrawal of benefits. I mean, for people of my age and Michael's, there was a kind of unofficial art subsidy in terms of unemployment benefit and the enterprise allowance scheme, from which all those sensation artists came from, a whole generation of filmmakers, and there doesn't seem to be anything in place to replace that. I mean, this festival is not something you really want. I used to come here 30 years ago, and this is a kind of middle-class lifestyle festival now, and I'm happy to be part of it because I'm middle class and having a lifestyle. But it was not that, and where have those sorts of things gone? Yeah. And this is a kind of testament to that. And when you see those shots of them on bomb sites, that's not an affectation. In the 70s, loads of major British cities were still rubble from World War II, and so that was the environment that they were carving space out in. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Yeah.
Well,
you remember it better than me.
I'm one of those people who was on one of those enterprise allowance schemes that helped me to become a director. And that would never have happened, without that sort of thing. So it is hard to find those little cracks now that bands like the Nightingales would have found, to keep them going, to keep them going. Yeah.
And everything shouldn't have to be a hobby where you have a day job, and you should be able to do these things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And make a living from it. Absolutely. I just find the whole tone of the thing fascinating. I was thinking about, for the record, I would like this on the record, I was thinking about Anvil, the story of Anvil, before the mention of we'd like it to be like Anvil. Have anybody here seen that? Another incredible, music documentary. But, did you go and look at any take an inspiration from anywhere, or were you really guided by him?
Well, the Anvil thing, I think, was Rob's suggestion to you, wasn't it? Yeah. And we genuinely are Nightingales fans, and we didn't think we wanted to take the piss out of them, but because he's funny enough anyway, he doesn't really need to sort of, have pity sort of, put upon him. But no, I mean, the stuff that I liked was, that I used to watch music documentaries, things like the Arena films that sort of, looked at people's lives in quite a lot of detail, the sort of detail you might not be able to do now on television. But I don't know about you, so you were...
Well, I just thought that, I thought that pretty soon after you started working on it, you realised it had to be just this kind of classic story of the hero's journey. There's a lot, it's like a Joseph Campbell plot line. He looks like he's going to do well, it all goes wrong, and he claws it back to a point where he's got sort of a degree of self-respect and happiness, if not massive commercial success. So and like my stepfather's a partner who knows nothing about any of this, and wouldn't like the music, but related to it as 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 a person in her 80s, related to it as a kind of story about a person. So I think we had to kind of try and, pretty early on, we realised we had to make it into that. Not least of all because there's so little footage of the group. I mean, there's about 3 bits of footage, really. So you can't make it into one of these things where we couldn't have afforded to clear it anyway, but you couldn't make it into this rock and roll retrospective because they're just not documented, which is another thing that's hard for people to believe now, I think, where everything's filmed on camera phones or put up on YouTube. There's whole, like the early 80s alternative comedy, it's just undocumented. And you couldn't make that kind of film about it, so you had to make it about a person, which I think is when Rob realised that he was going to have to be the through line for it, he wasn't entirely happy about that.
Yeah, because we love them as a band, but I think we realised that the few thousand devoted Nightingale fans would love the film, but the story's much better and bigger than that. Yeah.
And you guys knew each other, I think, for a long time before you realised you were both fans of the Nightingales. Is that right?
Well, we did know each other for a long time before we realised we were both fans of the Nightingales, because they don't come up in conversation a lot. It's not like you go, oh yeah. So
do you compare lists?
Well, Rob had asked me about doing it, and I'd gone round the houses trying to work out how to do it, and obviously no one was interested, and the only way you were going to be able to do it was to find someone to do it for nothing. And then when I had known Michael for years, and then how did I even find out that it was because you were doing something at Wolverhampton University?
Yeah, I was showing one of my films somewhere. I got speaking to a guy who turned out to be an ex-member of the Nightingales, who then went to see one of your shows and said, "Oh, there's this other guy in comedy that is a fan." So he sent me an email saying, "Are you a fan of the Nightingales? Do you want to make a film about them?" Literally those 2 sentences. And that was it, really. We sort of,
Do you fancy my friend? Yes, no, Xbox.
But it was. I think it's been difficult for both of us because, I mean, as you can see from how I look in that film, I was going through some difficulties at the time.
I thought you grew the beard just to stroke it. I thought it was just like
I think
we couldn't afford hair and makeup. Put it that way.
It was. Being able to really do what you wanted with someone that you get on well with, and being able to make compromises and figure out, problem solve it. It's not like that very often, and it's made other things come up. I got asked to adapt a book recently that I really liked for television, and I just thought it's going to take years, and it's going to be awful, and the whole experience is going to be dreadful. I might have been paid, but this was kind of such a nice thing to have done.
I think I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is right, that there were basically a crew of 3 people for 10 days, and that was all you had. Is that right?
There and thereabouts.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't as literal as that, and I shot a lot of bits and pieces on my own. But because we did these little bits of crowdfunding, and as we had the money, we shot a bit, and then decided if we
film some stuff, raise a bit of money, do 3 days filming, edit what was there, come up, have another 20 minutes. At the next benefit, show the 20 minutes, and I'll do a bit of stand-up Michael and Scher film, and then we'd use that money to then do the next bit. 20 minutes, right. And so it was kind of done over a course of about 2 or 3 years, wasn't it? And we'd show it at like festivals and things, and then put it together. But of course, with the group being what they are, by the time it came out, they were already nearly 2 albums down the line from where it was, and the story's changed again now with different things Rob's done since.
If somebody doesn't know much about the Nightingales, like me, apart from this film, and would like to know more, what's a good album to start with? Is there a particular place that you would recommend? Have you got favourites?
Well, I'd say get the first one, Pigs on Purpose, from 1982, and then get the new one from now.
Yeah. And Rob Lloyd's got an amazing new album out, which we'll talk about later. But he's made this an incredibly commercial-sounding country and western duets album, which is the next bit of his story, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's really brilliant, and it's the kind of thing that loads of people, millions of people would love if they heard it. But how does that happen?
Well, this is it. How do you discover anything these days?
Yeah.
There's so much everything. Yeah. Have we got any questions from the audience? Because I'm conscious I'm kind of hogging the mic here. Anybody else out there? Yes, we've got a lady down here at the front.
Hello. It's more of a comment, really, that about that kind of Rob wanting to do it and knocking on your door. there's something about Brummies as well that when you've knocked on the door for years and then it's suddenly opened, you're like, nah, I'm not going through there. So it's more of a comment about that really, and just there's also the soak of Birmingham in there as well, and just that subtlety that is Brummie, that really, for me, really sits under the whole film. And thank you very much, because nobody can ever nail Birmingham. I think somebody made a documentary about Birmingham like kind of 20 years ago, and that's the closest that I've ever seen somebody really kind of hit the fact that you can't define it.
You can't define it. I think when Michael was talking about Rob's modesty and lack of confidence, it's also a Birmingham thing. It's kind of a strange town in that, you know, we sort of talk about it in the film, but Manchester and Liverpool and Glasgow were all had the confidence. The people there had the kind of confidence to capitalise on their post-punk legacy. You know, but whereas Birmingham's just kind of keeps its head down and it seems embarrassed.
You can be adopted as a Brummie within about a year, but Manchester and Liverpool will never, she says, let you in.
Well, they don't even seem to shout about their sort of rock and heavy metal sort of thing, which is sort of remarkable, really.
Although there is about to be a Royal National Ballet based on the music of Black Sabbath, if you can get to that. So it's coming through.
Well, we had Asif Kapadia here earlier in the day with a ballet-based film, so hopefully he can put that one on screen. We'll be back here next year, yeah? Any other questions in the audience? Yes, fantastic.
So, thanks for making such a brilliant film. I mean, I bloody love it. And I think Rob's like a national treasure that's been neglected for a lot of years. The other one was Mark E. Smith, and I met him a few times and he was a twat. And I met Rob a few times and he's not. I'd just like to ask how you feel about your relationship with Rob. He seems like a really special bloke who pretends he's an idiot, but he isn't.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. Yeah, he pretends he's an idiot and he isn't. And then there's that scene where he's, he is running that business and doing all the horse stuff and the writing, you know. I don't know. I mean, I think doing the film, I think, puts it under strain, doesn't it, in some way.
We still have a relationship with him, don't we? And we're still, I didn't know him before the film. You knew him a little bit.
I only knew him a bit. I mean, I think he first got in touch with me because I was a minor celebrity on television, and I think he thought he turned up at a gig with that sitcom script, thinking there might be some way of getting money for a mid-80s alternative comedy style piece of material 20 years later. It wasn't. Although it is pretty funny when they do it, that, isn't it? You can feel that had it come out in the mid-80s, it would have chimed really well alongside the young ones and things like that, you know.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of fear of success moment that he had, do you think, wasn't it? He didn't kind of want to be forced to work with someone and be forced to keep doing this.
Sabotage the sitcom, yeah.
Pretends he's difficult, and he's not that difficult. He seems like actually quite a nice person somehow.
Yeah, he wasn't difficult when he was doing the filming. I think he knew what the benefits might be to the band, and I think the benefits have come from the film being released. But also, I think like everybody, he is a shy bloke, but I think because he got on well with Stu, and because they had a really good sort of rapport and he trusted him, and in the end we all sort of trusted each other, he sort of eased in it, and by the end I think he was sort of almost enjoying it. Yeah. Certainly when we did the stuff with Samira Ahmed at the end, he that, which was one of the last things we did, he was actually enjoying himself then, because it's sort of over and I can just arse about with.
So how did that come about, actually? How did you get that scene?
Well, it was Michael's idea to do a video for the song Gales Doc. They wrote a song about what it would be like to have a documentary made about them, which was just kind of perfect for this. And then we thought it'd be good if there was some, newsreader, journalist type doing it. And the only person I knew that I thought might do it, I knew Samira like 30 years ago, and she's got quite a good sense of humour and she'll try loads of things. So she turned up knowing Rob's words much better than he did.
Absolutely nailed it.
But Michael did all of that, and that it was all put together. I mean, Michael shoots all the music video type things in Toast and everything, so it was really a great thing to have in the film at the end.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's so many levels of meta. It's amazing. Well, I do have to ask you guys one more question. I mean, what's been happening with Robert since? Have you got anything else to tell us?
Well, they've done more
us?
Nightingales albums, but he's just made this. He made a country album with Janet Beveridge Bean from American bands 11th Dream Day and Freakwater that they recorded in Spain. And every Nightingales album has got a fairly straight kind of blue colour country song on it that you can imagine being done really well by Dolly Parton or someone like that. And he really understands that idiom, and he's written a whole album in it. And
yeah, so if we can, but when we go, if you've got 3 minutes to spare, we're going to show you the video for his new album, which I just did for him last week. I don't think many people have seen it yet, so you might enjoy that. But on the other bit of the story, which is great, is that the King Kong statue did eventually, or a replica of it, did come back to Birmingham for the Commonwealth Games, due in part to this film. And there was, obviously people wanted it back, and I've been talking about it for a while. But it did come back, so myself and Stewart and Rob were able to go and stand under it in Birmingham.
Typically
again.
when we went to see it, the local insurance company that had sponsored it, the woman came and stood and explained to us all about the statue and where it had come from, and we had to stand there. Oh yeah, it's just, again, it was really perfect. She's going, I don't know if you know, but it's been in a film.
Yeah.
Well, at least somebody was there to talk you through it. That's fantastic. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you very much. And thank you to Stewart and Michael.
We'll show this video, hopefully.
And let's roll the little update.
Thank you very much indeed
on
for
Robert
having us.
Lloyd's. Thank you.
Thanks.